Okay, so today we're going to start on the 29th Path of Qoph. This is part 2, the 18th key of the tarot card of the moon. So if you have not seen the first part, it might be helpful to go back and watch that, at least the very beginning, where we go through the introduction of what the Path of Qoph is and what all that means. So today.
So this is from the Magician's Tarot. Our founder of our organization, ESSG, Frater Barabbas. This is from one of his unpublished manuscripts. So what he did is take the 22 stages of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which describes sort of the meta myth that just about every story somehow takes place in. It's an archetypal story that all stories kind of resolve into, and map it onto the 22 major arcana of the tarot. And this is the part of the story called the magic flight, return and reintegration to society. This is the stage of the hero's journey that goes with the moon card. The magic flight, escape, crossing, the return threshold. The return cycle has its own associated resistances and trials that the seeker must undergo. The pristine state of accomplishment is followed by the darkness and pain associated with the rebirth and reintegration of the newly formulated self back into the mundane world. There is another threshold to be crossed, and it has a guardian at its gate, similar to the guardian threshold at the entrance. Thus, there are obstructions and potential self-betrayal in the process of reintegrating with the physical self, and the seeker must hold fast to what is true rather than what is illusory. So the hero's journey involves a hero, a person, you, being called out of their normal waking, everyday normal life to go on a heroic journey, to face obstacles, to travel to the outskirts of society, to go to the underworld, and retrieve some kind of boon, some kind of wisdom. Whether you're Parzival receiving the Grail to come back and heal the Fisher King, or you're Luke Skywalker rescuing the princess from the Death Star, you eventually have to come back. And the magic flight is the return, the coming back with the boon to society. And so, having been outside society and coming back, you have to reintegrate. You have to find a way to take the truths that you've learned through your trials and travails and stay true to it as you enter back into society. And again, there's obstacles and guardians to face on the way back. It's sort of the escape sequence, where the hero has to fight their way back and bring the treasure, the magic boon back to society. So here we have 3 archetypal versions of the moon card. We can see that they all have some very similar components. They have a representation of the moon, a number of little droplets dropping down, and then the background, there's 2 abandoned towers that separate the foreground from the beyond, with a path leading between them, and they all have 2 dog-like creatures guarding the path and a crayfish emerging from the waters. So the symbology here is, this is the return path. Those are the abandoned watchtowers at the very edge of civilization, and the reborn person, whether they're represented by the crayfish or by Kephra, the Kephra beetle, in the Thoth tarot in the middle, has to pass between the obstacles and beyond back into civilization. And the dogs are represented here, or Anubis, as they represent creatures that are watchful by day and by night. And on some of the cards, you can see that the Qoph is written down there, and also the sign for Pisces, which is since Qoph is one of the simple letters, the 12 simple letters that are assigned to the zodiac, the Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac is represented here.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about why the Kefra imagery is used.
Kefra is the creator deity that rolled the ball of creation out of the primal waters so that land and civilization could begin. And Crowley liked to use him because he is one of the four aspects of great god Ra, the sun god. And so Kefra represents the midnight version of Ra, the midnight sun, the darkest hour between dusk and dawn. And so the Kefra is representing that midnight, darkest hour of the night. Later, other people use the crayfish because it has very primitive connotations and perhaps even symbology of rebirth. There's some say that it's a symbolic of the Christ, of being reborn.
Can you talk about the Yuds?
Yes. So in the Rider Waite, all the way to the left, we have 15 Yuds that are representing the bondage to the material, the devil card.
The Yud itself.
Oh, the Yud itself. So Yud is the primal letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the sacred alphabet of the Kabbalah. And Yud is the flame that if you blow on, all the other letters come out of. So it represents sort of a primal energy. Also corresponds to the hand, ability to do things, to make changes.
And in each of the cards, those Yuds are representing what?
A different idea. So in the moon card,
they're representing energy.
They're representing energy, something that's being passed between the moon and the land below, the world. So we have...
Let's start with this one.
Oh, okay. So over on the right, the card for the Golden Dawn Ritual Magic deck, they have 4 to represent the Yud He, Vav He, the 4 elements. And Crowley has 9 because he wants to relate it to Yesod, which is the 9th Saphra, which of course has a moon correspondence. It has a planetary correspondence to the moon. And since it's at the base of the spine, it's Muladhara chakra, and it's connected to sexuality, of course, and base survival instincts here, and dreamingness, and night, and subconscious, and all things moonish. And the Rider Waite over on the left has 15 because they're tying it to the Devil card, the 15th card, which is representing the bondage to matter, which we'll see more of these ideas up ahead. Just a moment.
And this image?
In all these cards, there's a representation that the sun is around the corner. The sun is coming as we move from the darkest hour of the night to the dawn. But right now we're at midnight. This is the hour of midnight in this card. It is the new moon, the darkest moon. But the sun is around the corner. In fact, it's the next card in the sequence.
And then we see the biorhythms here in Crowley's deck.
The circadian rhythms.
To indicate the circadian rhythms. So here we have water in each of the 3 cards, a creature that is crossing from the water onto the land through a direct path that goes past these dogs and through 2 towers into the land of this double image where the Yuds are coming down. So we're on one side and we're looking at the gateway, and then there's another side that we can't see because we're looking at it, right? There's also the top of the water, and then there's the bottom of the water that's represented in this card as well. Did you speak enough about the desolate towers?
The desolate towers are watchtowers at the edge of civilization as we go back II civilization, which is probably beyond the towers and the rising of the sun. This is an area that used to be active and watched, but has been long ignored. It's old traditions and things like that that have been abandoned. And so the watchtowers are usually shown as being desolate.
Okay.
They're no longer manned or personed.
Yeah. So this is a real good kind of base introduction to the cards. Now we're going to go a little bit more in depth with various authors. So in looking at the Rider-Waite Tarot, we decided that the best interpretation was to use Robert Wang's Kabbalistic Tarot. I don't know if my picture is concealing that name or not. The path color here is a crimson or an ultraviolet type color. The sound is be natural, which I think is completely appropriate. Just be natural. I don't think that's what they meant, but there's a sound that goes along with it. And there's this simple letter. The simple letter is sleep. Eric, can you explain what a simple letter is in Hebrew language?
So in Hebrew, the alphabet, sacred alphabet, has 3 groups of letters. It has 3 mother letters that are the basic letters, the basic sounds, and the basic, they have an elemental correspondence to air, water, and fire. And they kind of represent 3 dimensions. You could look at it that way. Up, down, left, right, forwards, and backwards. And then you have 7 double letters. 7 double letters are called that because they have 2 forms, one within a word and a different form at the end. And being 7, they are attributed to the 7 archetypal planets. And they represent sort of energy going out, kind of, if you can imagine the Kabbalistic the cube of space. And then you have 12 simple letters. And the simple letters, there's 12 of them, so they're related to the zodiac. They represent boundaries, the edges of the cube of space. And they're called simple because they only have 1 form. And the Qoph itself, being one of the simple letters, is either the ear or the back of the head. And here, Robert Wang is relating it to sleep.
The simple letters are guardians. They have a guardian energy.
Guardian energy, and they represent boundaries.
Represent boundaries. Okay, so the card itself is referred to as the ruler of flux and reflux, the child of the children of the Almighty, right? So it is the thing that is created by the things that are created by God. It's a really important point to make. The thing that is created by the things that the Creator made. The path of Qoph connects Netzach with Malkuth, and we covered that in part 1 quite a bit, and it's described as the victory of the material world. But today we're going to be looking at its dynamic as the deceptive effect of the apparent power of the material forces. So this is a place of rebirth. You're coming back. So there's a type of rebirth that's there. And Wang is telling us that we should think about this in 2 different ways. The first birth is that you're incarnated into a body. And that's the soul's organization of the physical body, which it will inhabit. And there's a sleep that precedes a waking mortal consciousness, a pre-consciousness that comes out of the collective unconscious of Netzach. So you're alive and you have a body and you have a form, but you're asleep within that form. Yet this is one of the places that humanity exists. And then secondly, when a person is a spiritually developing individual, they wake up from that sleep by conquering the phantoms that are reflected in the world itself, in the material density of the world, in the actual experiences, not in the thoughts around the experiences or the emotions around the experiences, but the actual experience of what's happening in space and time. So just a little bit more on what Wang had to say. This is a path of probation. The student must face and conquer the phantoms of the dark recesses of their own mind, as well as those of race. In that sense, it can be terrible and involve real dangers to the emotional stability of those who are not strong enough to handle the experience. Such inner disturbance may result in physical problems. On the other hand, the tradition states that successfully treading the path confers the power of bewitchments and casting illusions. When we slay the dragons of the deep recesses of our sleep consciousness and understand their mechanisms, we gain the capacity to manipulate those qualities in ourselves as well as others. So there's quite a bit to say about that particular paragraph.
Hopefully you use your powers for good.
So what we're really dealing with here is we're dealing with our inner protector parts that are going to take away the memories of the bad experiences or the traumas, or maybe just not even tune in to the consciousness of innate awareness. So some of this comes from us and some of this comes from the way that we were raised, but some of this is really the way these ideas that are handed down from generation to generation about what's appropriate behavior, how you dress, what it means to be whatever identity you're choosing to take on. So when he says those of race, the cultural identity, he's really tying into some really subtle aspects of things that we take for granted that we don't really look into, because they're just things that people know. You just know it, right? Everybody knows that this is the way it is and that's the way it is. And sometimes we don't really want to question that authority. We don't want to question it or go beyond it. I think you're going to speak on that again later.
Yes. Coming back to that concept.
So it can be really scary. And so he's saying, oh, you shouldn't do it if you're strong enough. I really don't think that anybody is going to have any strength unless they begin the process of actually doing it. You know, this is really continuing to adhere to the norms of society will eventually lead you into a place where you will not know who you are anymore. You will not be a spiritual seeker, certainly. So I see it as a fundamental challenge that needs to be approached with bravery and surety, to look the demon in the eye and try to figure out what it is. And it's that very process that makes you strong. And he also makes a reference to physical problems. So if you try to do this and you don't know how, then it could lead to physical problems. Well, I would actually argue that the physical problems are a result of these unresolved subconscious lunar pieces that lie just behind that silvery veil, just on the other side of that mirror or on the other side of those desolate towers. And then he says that you can chant bewitchments and cast illusions. And again, I would argue that that sort of thing goes on all the time. And generally, when you're sleeping, you can't really be aware when somebody is casting an illusion on you or a bewitchment, or, you know, they're just kind of nudging you to go in the direction that they want you to go, right? The difference between bewitching someone and nurturing them generally has to do with consent. And I would add to that intent, right? What is your intent? Is your intent to try to help someone? Or is your intent just to try to utilize them in whatever manner that you may need them for? So I would discourage that. And offer that you may, over the course of working with moon energy, find the moon card energy, that you may find that you're more able to notice when you go into these sorts of trance states, especially when you apply some of the other skill sets that we have been working on here. So one way or the other, birth, death, and resurrection are pivotal points for the path of the moon. This isn't symbolic, it's biological, and it occurs in the darkness and the light of our sense perception. So depending on how awake you are, how much sense perception you have, right? Being awake and having sense perception are directly linked and correlated. That's the key to tapping into and becoming aware of this cyclical wave motion, the energy process that's linked by the beetle of the sun. And the work of this path is ended with the dissolution of energy back to Netzach, which we haven't studied yet, so we don't really know exactly where we're going. We're just stumbling in darkness. To understand this path is to understand the relationship of your personality consciousness to the physical vehicle, the body that you have for this incarnation, which is really hard for a lot of people because they perceive themselves as only being a body, and they perceive appearances as being first and foremost in importance. So this is, again, giving rise to the meaning of the word sleep, that when you go into a sleep, most people are just going to bring their day into the sleep pattern with them. That's all it really will be. You won't necessarily be talking to your guides and getting prophetic information about the future or things like that. You'll just be processing your day residue. But once you consciously transcend this and you're working with the path of the moon, then things like lucid dreaming and dream yoga, or just observant dreaming, consciously observing how your subconscious mind is going to play things out when it's given the open expanse of the dream world, which we always have access to anyway.
Yes, transcending the path of the moon, waking up would give one of the more interesting powers would be lucid dreaming, so that you're conscious that you're dreaming both when you're asleep and when you're awake.
And you could alter your dream at that point then too, if you chose to do so. So if you wanted to go to the party in the middle of Jupiter, you could just go in the middle of your dream. That would be really awesome. I wonder what we would find. All right. And let's tell you.
Okay, so here's the Crowley interpretation from his book of Thoth. Ruled by Pisces, this is the last stage of life, winter. It may be called the gateway of resurrection and is connected to the cerebellum. In the system of the old Aeon, the resurrection of the sun was not only from winter, but from night. And this card represents midnight, which is why we have Kefra from Liber. The path is guarded by taboo. She is uncleanliness and sorcery. Upon the hills are black towers of nameless mystery, of horror and fear. All prejudice, all superstition, dead traditions, and ancestral loathing, all combine to darken her face before the eyes of men. It needs unconquerable courage to tread this path. Here is a weird, deceptive life, the fiery senses balked. The moon has no air. The knight on this quest must rely on the three lower senses: touch, taste, and smell. Such light as there may be is deadlier than darkness, and the silence is wounded by the howling of wild beasts. And so, if you think about the way back from a spiritual journey, like, say, you can imagine a retreat where you had gone with some yogis for a few years into the wilderness, and you're coming back to society, all of a sudden you can see all the dead tradition and all the robotic behavior that people have from societal programming, all the things that are guarded by taboo, the things that you're not supposed to do. The breaking of taboo is a way to release tremendous amounts of energy. And so it is bound up in such things as fear and darkness. Since it is so dark, you have to rely on the lower senses, the direct ones, touch, taste, and smell, which are very direct. The sense of smell goes straight to your memories and activates them.
Okay, so first of all, I want to point out that in typical Crowley fashion, it's just very intense.
Yes.
And very bleak and, nameless mystery and horror and fear. And he's not wrong, but he's definitely taking it to a very high degree. We did a lot of heavy editing of his narrative because it's just very, very, very much emphasizing that it's a place that you don't want to go. It's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely horrible place. So taboo are the things that we're told that we're not supposed to do. They may have been told to us explicitly by someone, don't eat that mushroom. That's not really a taboo. That's just smart common sense. What would be a good example of a taboo?
You have to wear clothes when you go outside.
You have to wear clothes when you go outside. That's a really good one.
That's probably a good one.
So, in a lot of traditions that are spiritual, they use clothlessness as a way of moving past the restrictions and the hindrances that we have around our conceptions of our bodies and what they do. And everybody has to do what they feel comfortable doing. Y'all get to pick what taboo you get to break. That's the great thing of being a seeker versus somebody.
And Crowley was living in a time of a lot
of taboo.
A lot of taboo, and a lot more social
Don't touch yourself.
Than, it's in society and culture today. And so for a lot of his spiritual development was the breaking of all these ridiculous tattoos and what you can and can't do between consenting adults in the privacy of your own home and such things, were strongly, very heavily taboo. And there was a lot of ridiculous behavior that people went through to hide that they were actually doing these things.
And really what they were trying to hide, all in all, is a lot of it comes down to hiding our innate nature, which is animalistic in form. And so, you make sure that when you go outside, you don't smell bad, that your hair is kempt, and that your clothes are clean and not ripped and match and are from a particular designer in a particular price range. And right, so, you have all of these different ways of presenting yourself in the world. And so this is really withdrawing. It's unplugging from that mechanism of this is what you're supposed to do. We don't know why we do it, but this is how I was raised. I haven't really thought about why I'm doing it, but I was raised to be this way. And I was told that this is what good people do, right? Because if you don't do it, then you're unclean.
Becoming aware of the social constructs and how much of it is just dead weight.
Yeah, and how much you can get away with bending.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some more.
There's some more what? So, yeah. So what did you want to, did you have something to say about this? Okay, so the three senses, so Eric pointed out smell, but my favorite sense that I think really speaks to this is touch, the proprioception, and the somatics. And how I'm constantly saying that if you can use your body sensation as a way of relating with your experiences, then you can directly access contents in the subconscious and unconscious mind to be released so that they don't affect you anymore. But there's the howling of wild beasts that you're going to hear when you're on the way to get there. So I talked about that quite a bit in part 1 in the cerebellum, so I'm not going to go into it anymore. I just want to kind of mention that that's tied in here. Okay. Do you have anything else? Okay, I'm ready to turn it now. You ready? Yeah. Okay.
So Crowley goes on, to what god shall we appeal for aid? It is Anubis, the watcher in the twilight, the god that stands upon the threshold, the jackal god of Qoph, who stands in double form between the ways. And the reason Anubis comes up here is Anubis is a lentil deity. He stands at the very edge between day and night and all sorts of opposites between the world of culture and society and the underworld. The Anubis animal, the jackal, is watchful by both day and night, so it inhabits both worlds. In Egyptian mythology, Anubis was the guide of the dead. He was the psychopomp, similar to, say, Mercury, and he's also tied to Hecate. So he is the helper of the lost, those who are lost in the darkness of the underworld. One is reminded of the mental echo of the subconscious realization of that supreme inequity which mystics have constantly celebrated in their accounts of the dark night of the soul. The best men, the true men, do not consider the matter in such terms at all. Whatever horrors may affect the soul, whatever abominations may excite loathing in the heart, whatever terrors assail the mind, the answer is the same at every stage. How splendid is this adventure! So the dark night of the soul that he's referring to is the point you get to when you realize that all of the scripture and sacred knowledge that you've ever learned is just yet another structure. It's no more true than anything else. It's helped you get as far as you're going, but at some point you have to go beyond scripture. You have to write your own, create your new own understanding. And at that point, it can be very difficult because it feels like everything is alive. It's not alive. It's all structures. It's all structures and tools to help you along your path. And Crowley's quote is, "Let the illusion of the world pass over thee, unheeded as thou goes from midnight to morning." Perhaps not let it just pass over you, but realize that it is all an illusion. It's a construct. So, and we create our own constructs out of our own experiences and knowledge that are just as good as those that we've inherited from society, because they're our own personal set of beliefs. And that's what happens after the dark night of the soul, the midnight, when your belief structure comes crashing down and the dawn rises, you're able to create your own set of beliefs and realize it's just another illusion.
So in parenting, there's a concept called junk behavior, that if your child is exhibiting junk behavior, the best thing to do is to just get close to them so that they don't feel abandoned or left alone. They know you're there, but not to pay it too much mind, not to feed into it, not to get involved in it. It's not to walk away in the other room for them to handle their own emotions, because they require your emotional regulation to learn emotional regulation. So there's this certain sort of way of observing something and being aware of it and letting it occur and just watching it without getting hooked up in what's going on. Because the dark night of the soul, it's formulated in an idea that reality is an illusion, but that in and of itself is not what causes the gnashing of teeth in the middle of the night. Is this realization that it's all an illusion. It's the process that you have to go through to get to that place. And that is not an intellectual process as much as we might like to think that it is. It's an emotional one. It occurs on an emotional and energetic level. And so that's why it's so dark, because you have to leave. You have to abandon what makes sense. You have to be willing to withdraw from that thing that gave you all your structure and all your organization and all of the keys of how you're going to live a successful life. You have to withdraw from all of that. And where do you go? You don't know, because there's no flashlight, right? So with the original method, just do what everyone says you should do what the church tells you, do what politics tell you, follow this cultural identification pattern, whatever it may be. That's easy. But to make up your own rules and to go into the darkness, that's very hard, especially when the darkness has all these monsters inside of it. The monsters are just you. That's all they really are. That fear is just yourself. And so he's really kind of giving us a lot of support. It's something that's very useful for me, is like, wow, this is a whole lot of fun. Look at where I landed today. Whew. And kind of having this sort of sense of excitement, this sort of sense of curiosity, this sort of sense that there's this amazing array of experiences once you step out of that box of certainty. There's this incredible kaleidoscope of infinity.
Yes, it's the hero's journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty darn cool. So, anything else?
No.
Ta-da, we just have a few more.
So here's the Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot by Chicken Tabitha Cicero. On this path, the initiate must face all the phantoms that have been repressed and pushed to the back of the head, the subconscious. The path is full of animal lusts and desires, a symbol of the lower astral. It is overflowing with illusions and ghosts, where the darkness is ruled by night, just as the sun is ruled by day. On this path, the initiate learns not to fear the dark, but examine it carefully and allow it to come to its natural conclusion, the rising of the sun. So again, we see a lot of the same ideas. And, we should mention that the moon card is the dark side of the moon.
Right.
Whereas the high priestess is the full moon.
Oh yeah, we forgot to talk about that. Go ahead.
And in the hero's cycle, the high priestess is the meeting with the spirit guide. Not every, but a lot of times in stories, the hero, when they begin their story, they refuse the call. It's like the first stage. And when they accept the call, they meet with the spirit guide. They meet with Obi-Wan or somebody who's going to support them and help them along the path. And that's the high priestess. That's the zenith of the moon. Whereas this is, the guide is gone, and we're at the darkest part, the lower astral, back of the head, overflowing with illusions. And we have to take everything that we've learned on our journey to create our own path. And again, you can see that they have the same symbolism, just slightly rearranged.
Really similar symbolism. And the really nice thing about this is you can kind of see the progression of how Wang thought about the moon and how Crowley thought about the moon, and now how Chick and Tabitha think about the moon is really, I like it. It's a lot more, to me, psychoanalytic and adaptive. That this, you can learn how to, instead of gritting your teeth and going through it without any kind of aid, you have Anubis, but you also have your senses. So you have this ability to ground, you have this ability to breathe and be in your body. And this gives you some sort of platform where you don't have to be afraid, you can just observe. and allow. Observe and allow, which when you stop struggling with the situation and you allow yourself to settle in to the unknown, then you will get to the rising of the sun. That will happen following. It's very sure. It's a law of physics. It's a law of spiritual physics, as it were.
Good. And here is the Tarot of Ceremonial Magic by Milo Duquette. And he's got a very similar setup. He's got twin Anubis and Khafra. And instead of towers, he put the 2 pyramids, which is awesome.
And 3, actually, because look, there's the path is a pyramid.
Path is a pyramid, too.
With the little Khafra at the bottom.
And he also included these 2 white spaces down on the bottom of the card with the little symbol. So those are the 2 genies of the major arcana card. On the left is the mercurial genie, or the good side, and on the right is the Qophic genie, or the dark side. And he gives us 4 divinatory meanings. So in spiritual matters, the dark night of the soul. In matters of the heart, deception, falsity. In intellectual matters, illusion and madness. In material matters, the threshold of significant change. So a lot of the same ideas. He also included the Crowley's mnemonic, witch moon, upon thy beck of blood afloat, the midnight beetle's brave prophetic boat, as a little poem to help you think about and memorize the meaning of the card. The witch moon, of course, is the new moon. And of course, he loves to have blood. And the midnight beetle is Khafra, a brave prophetic boat that carries the sun from the darkness to the light.
Crowley described the yuds as drops of blood. You know, it's some kind of essence that's coming from the divine and the unseen ethers down to us. And so that's what he's referencing. There's blood afloat. There's energy. There's dynamic life force in the air. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So we have just a couple. So in conclusion, we have a couple of non-traditional decks. This is the deck that was done by Osho. Osho was the author. I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out who wrote the deck, and apparently it was him. So if you look really closely, the iconography is different. There's a moon there, and there are hands. And this is a vagina or a womb. This is an opening. And this is the other side of what we have, people here and people here. And so it's the patterns of the ancient journey of your soul. And it also looks quite a bit like an hourglass, we thought.
Yeah, and he brings in the idea of past lives, which is fitting. It relates to the idea of all this junk in the subconscious that's been pushed to the back.
So not only are your weighted subconscious materials, the dissociative traumas, the kunda buffers, the social programming, not only do you get those from your ancestry through multi-generational transmission, they found that this actually trauma is stored on a genetic level. They think thus far, this is what they think, that trauma is stored at a genetic level, and that we can inherit a trauma that we may never have actually experienced before in this waking lifetime, yet
Through epigenetics.
Through epigenetics, we experience it. So for example, when there's a really loud airplane that flies overhead, which really kind of sucked growing up underneath BWI, I would have flashes, I would have recollections and memories of experiences of airplanes flying over my head in a very unfriendly manner. And so I would see the recollections, I would hear them, I would experience them. When it first started to happen, I wasn't sure if they were real or not. I remember talking to my parents about that. And they're like, no, that didn't happen. course it didn't happen. It didn't happen in my lifetime. So we can get stuff that way, but we can also get them through our past lives, right? And so we can also get our genetic connections too. It's worth discussing that. This is why sometimes people have such a strong affinity for a culture that they were not born into, that they are not part of, they weren't raised with, but they have very strong sense of resonance with certain cultures because they were probably living a past life with that culture.
And this is a fun one. I like Bowie, so I bought the Starman Tarot. I perceive the truth through the inner veil and its reflection, the journey to the inner wisdom of the subconscious. Woman who menstruates during the moon experiences her creative release during the full. The dark reflects and distorts. Be courageous as you explore the darkness. Face your fears, embrace uncertainty. Pay attention to what your dreams say. Let your subconscious guide you through a new phase of the journey. Buried memories may be unraveling. Look for the light in your world. Decipher the shadows.
Ground by eating whole foods.
Exercise and take care of your body. All good advice. It's a new interpretation of a very old card.
Very nice. And it brings in the element of menstruation more so than any of the other decks did. And I know that we were supposed to talk about the sexual energy that's bound up in this card too. Because all the cultural programming around sexual energy. Mm-hmm. Ha ha. So there's a lot of that's there too. Oh, and the last one is Sally Ann Glassman's New Orleans Voodoo deck that was also created with Louis Martinet. The magic mirror calls up occult powers and sorcery. So here we have, in all three of these non-traditional cards, we have reflection and we have water. And in this one, what we have is a mirror. And these are the hands of the ancestors and also the hands of the Loa, the sacred spirits that inhabit the energetic realms, the non-physical realms. And this mirror is the mirror through which you see yourself. So I have the offerings that she provides, that they provide. So bowls of water, mirrors. We have our mirror, which you can't see because we're having very lunar opticals.
Magic mirrors are usually black.
Mm-hmm. You take a piece of glass and you paint that black. And of course the card itself. And she has a litany, so she has an actual song. This is a chant or a song that you could use. And this you would do if you wanted to become possessed by some of that energy so that you could actually have a visionary experience of the energy of the card in a way that's different than any of the ones that we're offering. And here she describes it. Our world has been sick. We are sick because we have been attending to a soulless surface illusion. This is where the illnesses of our society come from. We have forgotten that body, mind, and spirit are interconnected, and we have forgotten that the body is a sacred space.
So I wanted to include this because it is so telling for the moon card. All that you touch and all that you see, all that you taste and all that you feel, all that you love, all that you hate, all you distrust, all you save, all that you give, all that you deal, all that you buy, beg, borrow, or steal, all you create, all you destroy, all that you do, and all you say, all that you eat and everyone you meet, all that you slight and everyone you fight, all that is now and all that is gone, all is to come and everything under the sun is in tune, but the sun is eclipsed by the moon.
So here's our list of references.